Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to the Authoritas Tea Time SEO. I'm SEO Joe Blogs and I'm joined here by Kerry Shepherd. Thank you all for coming to Friday's session of Tea Time SEO. We have these daily at 4 p.m. and it's really an opportunity for those to take a break, connect with others and learn something new. Thank you very much everyone for coming. We've got Blake, we have Lawrence, Azim, Raphael. We've got some great speakers on today, and they'll be talking about Google Tag Manager, what you need to do. So please leave your questions in the chat, and we will come back to them after they have finished sharing their insightful tips. So we have Paul, Gerry, and Gemma with us today. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paul, and then they will all share their insightful tips. Thank you very much. Over to you, Paul.
Yes, my name is Paul Lovell. I'm SEO consultant, founder, always evolving SEO, been in the digital marketing SEO industry for well over 10 years. Worked with many startups and large e-commerce sites in the UK and stateside. Currently pretty obsessed with schema via Tag Manager because it's so flexible. And yeah, just into everything search and analytics related, really.
Hi, so my name's Gerry. I've been in the industry nearly 20 years. My first website was actually produced in Microsoft Word, which is a bit embarrassing when I look back at it. I've been an SEO and Analytics geek for pretty much all of that time. I saw the evolution of analytics, saw the evolution of SEO. It's been kind of an interesting fun rise. Currently, I'm the SEO Director at Rise at 7, but I was the SEO technical lead at Just Eat. I've worked with the BBC, government, e-commerce websites, kind of everywhere. Fun fact about me, I was once part of a human record-breaking pizza, as in like there was about 1,000 of us trying to pretend to be part of a pizza. And you can find me on Twitter as @Durgle.
Hi, I'm Gemma Elsworth. I've been a digital analyst for just over 10 years. I'm currently heading up the digital performance analysis team at DWP Digital, but I've worked across all sorts of industries like finance and retail and travel. I've been using Tag Manager for most of that time as my go-to method to use analytics.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I go into. Yeah, so my first tip is, use it for analytics. That's what it was built for. The amount of Tag Manager accounts I've got access to that they still haven't implemented Tag Manager for, they've got it for just like a Facebook pixel or a live chat bit of code, and they're not using it. And the other good thing is when you use it for analytics, the flexibility that you have to fire events, it's a lot easier, and you can do a lot more rather than relying on the developers to apply that old on-click code. So yeah, you use it for what it's built for. Number two is one of the ones that I like to do, which is to track it for 0 results on internal search, especially in e-commerce. So what you can do is set the variable up. So when it comes up and it says that there's 0 products or no products found, it'll automatically apply no index tag. To obviously make sure that Google's getting the right signal there. You can also have it for an event in analytics, and then from analytics you can then ping yourself an alert, so you get an idea of, why that might be happening. Is it because you've just got no stock, or is it because it's a new product that your competitors are selling and you're not? So it gives you some really interesting insights into how you can leverage that information for yourselves and the business. And number three, my favorite at the moment, which is schema. Now you can use plugins and different types of apps out there, depending on what platform you're on, which is great. But what I found is a lot of them are limited. I think at the moment in product schema, there's 48 different types of schema that you can have nested underneath that. And most of them only give you like a handful, which is usually the sort of bare minimum that Google would require for product or product and review. Is usually all you get, whereas you can really get into a lot more depth with your structured data, which will obviously send a much clearer picture to Google about what that page is and what pages are related to it. So that's my 3 tips. And over to you, Gerry.
Okay, the one thing I would say, and I think some people almost overestimate what Google Tag Manager is, it's basically just JavaScript injection. If you're ever searching for information on GTM, what you'll find is that the one website that will keep coming up is by a guy called Simawava, and he did like a whole rant for about half an hour on basically why it is literally just JavaScript injection. It isn't anything else. It doesn't do things like have states and similar bits and pieces. But I mean, the one thing I would describe GTM as being is the IFTTT for your website. If you've used IFTTT for anything like it's if this then that, if you use that anywhere else, then that is exactly what GTM is, nothing else. The one other thing that I've sort of struggled with over the times when I've been implementing GTM is race conditions. What I mean by that is that you'll often find that you're trying to scrape something from the website before the actual website has finished loading it up. So you have to make sure that your GTM scraping is fired after the DOM elements are on the page or data layers are actually published. So you'll have to kind of make sure that everything's loaded in that order. Often you find that delaying or slowing down the way in which your analytics works or analytics is tracked, you can actually track a lot more. But at the same time, you might find that you're tracking less people if some people aren't fully loading up the page, if you've got slow loading pages. So basically race conditions. As Paul mentioned, if you're using the preview mode, you can kind of look into tracking if that's actually happening. You can see if the status of data layers, you can see the status of events before you basically fire it off. And the other thing that I think is really critical, one of the things I did today, I'm not sure if I've told my boss yet, but I basically put the Konami code onto the Rise at 7 website. So if you go to riseat7.com and then type in up, down, left, right, BA, what happens is it starts to, well, it does something fun. Give it a try at some point. I've done this on a load of websites, and actually the guy that wrote the script for me is Simawava. So if you want the script to put Konami code on your own website, have a look at Sima's website. One thing you can do is you can actually tell everybody that you've done this and you get loads of backlinks for it. So it's a quick way of getting backlinks as well for SEO people. But my point is that if you are able to scrape people's keystrokes, you can also scrape things like credit card information or email addresses and similar bits and pieces. Now, it is shocking how often I've kind of audited a GTM account or looked at a client's account and said to them, by the way, who is this guy? And sometimes it's the guy they fired like a year ago. Sometimes it's an agency that they're no longer working with. And sometimes data is being sent out to tools and things like Hotjar or trying to give other examples, but you can fire data out to other accounts that the client might not even have access to. So security is absolutely critical in GTM. On top of that, I've been known to break websites using GTM when I've been playing around. Generally speaking, it's my own websites, but I would make sure that you've got nobody in your business that can break your website if you don't trust them fully. So make sure like the administration, the publishing rights are kept by the right people. And the other thing I think is critical is page speed. One of the big things that I did when I was working at Just Eat was we audited the GTM account to see how much we could remove. And we could remove about 60 to 70%. And the remaining bits and pieces that we couldn't remove, we actually managed to delay the firing of it. So the main page loaded up and a lot of the tracking for Facebook pixels or trying to think of other tracking, but basically tracking that wasn't critical to the business, that was fired much later in the page, and that really did speed up the user experience. The other thing you can do is you can actually use GTM to speed up your website using Instant Page. So Instant Page is a little script that allows you to preload the next page based on interactions. So there's opportunities for people to really speed up websites using GTM or slow it down. The other thing that I think is fun is you can do really cool stuff. I mentioned before that you can put the Konami code onto it. You can even put dinosaurs onto it. You can fix a 404 page using a little bit of JavaScript. So as I mentioned, it's just JavaScript. So if there's something on your page you want to fix, your developers can't fix it, you want to just test whether or not something will work better. Again, my best example is the 404 page. I've often fixed 404 pages to have a better user experience just using GTM. And the reason I do this is often almost to test or to prove that you will get a conversion rate increase. As Paul mentioned, you can even fix title tags or cookie notices or whatever legal thing that you actually need to do. So there's loads of opportunities you can do just using GTM. I think that's over to you, Gemma.
Thanks, Gerry. Yeah, so my tips follow on from a few of the things that have already been said. The first one is use online resources when you've got something that you want to be able to do and you think you might be able to do it in Tag Manager, the chances are someone else out there on the internet has already tried to do it and they've already written it up. He's already been mentioned, but Simo Ahava has got a fantastic blog. I've learned so much of what I've done in Tag Manager from him, from reading his blog. Find it, read it. It'll give you ideas for things that you never thought about that you might want to try on your website that you can use. And he also talks about all the new stuff. So whenever Tag Manager has a new release, he will talk about it does this shiny new thing and here's how you can make the most of it. So he's definitely worth looking up. But Google anything that you're trying to do and somebody somewhere will have tried to do it before. Once you find that cool stuff, have a go with it. It's got debug mode, which means that what you can do is you can put it in preview and you can run it on your website, and your website will run as if that thing is live, but it isn't live. So you can test what you're doing. You can make sure that it works. And if it doesn't work, you can just trash it and no one ever needs to see that you did something that was really daft. Some of the things that I've been able to do with this, the first thing I ever did was use the weather API to pull the weather into our Google Analytics. And it just picked up whether it was raining or whether it was sunny in the area that the user was. And the hope with that at the travel company that I was working at was to work out whether people looked for holidays more when it was raining, so that we could maybe change our Google ads around the weather to show different ads based on the weather. I've also done things like inject warning messages. So if something's going wrong in the industry somewhere, if a airline has gone bust or something, and we need to put a message on the website that says, if you need to call, ring this number, it's really easy to just go into Tag Manager and pull out something that pops up on your front page and says, here's what you need to do. It's a really quick way of getting things in without having to go through a whole development release. And the last thing that I would talk about, and it's something that I use now every day in government. So we have 60 different websites that we run Google Tag Manager on, and we run Google Analytics on. And as you can imagine, picking up different websites and different analytics is hard and complicated. And sometimes it's not the same person that's picking it up all the time. Sometimes you'll go to a new company and you'll pick up somebody else's Google Tag Manager, or you're going to have to leave that Google Tag Manager for someone else to pick up. So think about consistency, think about naming conventions, think, if you get the opportunity, think about what your tags want to look like in Google Analytics, because if you can do them all consistently, all of your reports can use the same regexes to pull out bits of whatever you've got in your tag, or anyone who's looking at it can understand what that tag means and why it's there. You're going to DWP whenever load the dummy work, its basics will work off the box, and only need to edit things right, and we don't to that, and it saves hours and hours of tagging time.
Hi, Gemma. Thank you for that. I think there was just a bit of internet connection issues. So you were just to confirm the last point you were saying, to try to be consistent with your work.
Yeah, so we at DWP, we have about 60 different websites that we run Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics on. So in order to do that, obviously not the same person looks at those analytic accounts every day, and it all needs to be similar and consistent so that we understand what we're looking at really easily. It means if you start at a new company, if these practices have been followed, then it's easy for you to pick up. It's also easy for you to leave if you're leaving a company and you know someone else has got to pick something up. What it's meant for us at DWP is that we've been able to use these naming conventions and these tagging conventions to build a dummy GTM container. So we've got all of our template tags set up within a dummy container, and all we do whenever we set up a new website is import those dummy tags into the new container for the website, and all the basic tagging works straight out of the box. This has saved us hours and hours of tagging, because now whenever we launch a new website, we launch it with this container and we just edit for the different things about that website rather than the standard things that we have on every website. So all of our button tagging and external link tagging is all exactly the same for all of our sites, and that all just works straight away.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So many great tips from Gerry, Paul, and Gemma. I'm going to pass over to Gerry because I see we've got quite a few questions in the chat.
Great, thank you. So our first question is for Paul. Why do you implement schema through Tag Manager? Isn't it easier to add them as code in the end of the blog, or did he just misunderstand?
The reason I do it through Tag Manager is because it's scalable. So, for example, you're an e-commerce or you're you've got a blog and you've got 10 pieces of content going out each month. What you can do is you can pull the custom variables in. So you can pull your H1 in, you can pull information from in the metadata. So actually within the source code of the page, you can actually pull that information as well into Tag Manager and then essentially print out as your schema. And I know someone else mentioned elsewhere about using one of the schema generators. They're fine, but if you do it the way that Google tells you to do it within their developer guidelines, which is just to copy that bit of JSON LD and just drop it in a custom HTML tag, you can only test that in the rich results snippet tool. If you want to be able to test it within the structured data testing tool, which gives you a bit of a better breakdown, you need to wrap it in a special function code so it actually renders it within structured data testing, because otherwise it won't work.
Great, thank you. And off the back of that, where would you start if you want to do schema by GTM?
Yeah, so obviously Google's got lots of information on it. They've got their own guidelines as well. So obviously if you're looking for a SERP feature, then go to Google Developer Guidelines. If you're wanting to understand schema a little bit better, then you're going to have to go across to schema.org and start to understand how those different types of schemas or entities are actually joining together to build like a web page. So then that way you get into like the graph format of schema, which is like this blog post is part of this web page, which is part of this website, which is published by this organization, and this is the author and this is the founder, and they've won these awards, and it just goes on and on. So there's a lot that you can put together in there.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for anyone. One of the things that often comes up with GTM tracking completions of, one of the things that often comes up with GTM is tracking completions of a form without a thank you page. Varying answers on this, and wondering what your thoughts are.
So that's actually really easy with Google Tag Manager usually. One of the problems with it is that it doesn't always work effectively. There's actually a list for a form submission. The downside is that sometimes with JavaScript, you can kind of overwrite or bypass it almost. So this usually happens with jQuery. So there is actually a way of tracking form completions using GTM very, very easily with a built-in listener. However, a couple of things to note. Firstly, you have to wait for the GTM to fire before you kind of process it. Otherwise, what happens is it changes page, so it doesn't track it properly. And the second part of it is that sometimes it will break if you're using jQuery and similar bits and pieces. So there are solutions, again, so you can do things like push in a data layer or something on the thank you page, but that's where things get a little bit more complicated. The best thing to do is to fire an event on the thank you page. So what happens is when the page actually goes to where it says thank you, you add a little bit of code there, which then pushes something to fire something in GTM. That's the best way of doing it. Paul, I don't know if you've got any better suggestions.
Yeah, no, I've run into the same issues, especially within the HubSpot environment, where it has like the inline thank you, so it just changes the message. And sometimes even if you look for, there's a part within GTM which is when the element becomes visible, and sometimes even when you try to track off of that, it can be a bit painful and a bit inconsistent. So usually I just tell people to go for the thank you page, and obviously like Gerry mentioned with the 404 page, it's a chance to re-engage with that user after they've completed that initial thank you. So you can say, here's our latest blog post, or follow us on social, or here's our most recent video that we've put on YouTube. So you've got that extra alternative chance to really engage with that user other than, yeah, thanks, we'll be in contact with you in the next 24 or 48 hours. So yeah, you can take that engagement that step further. But yeah, when you're trying to track those like on-click events, so to say, sometimes stuff does break. And that's the other thing with Tag Manager. You've got to watch and make sure your developers know that you're using Tag Manager to do all this different stuff, because otherwise they're going do their usual 5 p.m. Friday upload, and then you've just lost all your tracking over the weekend.
So can I just confirm?
Good to think about. Sorry, it is always good to think about trying to make friends with your developers as well. That's a tip that someone gave me years ago. That's been great. If you get to know your developers and understand their job and respect how hard it is, that can really help when you need help with things, and you can go and talk to them about, look, I'm really struggling with this tag and I think I need a little bit of JavaScript. And usually if you build that relationship, then you've got that willingness to help you with things as well.
Great, thank you. Gemma, can we just confirm
with your developers?
Sorry, Joe. What is the name of the blog and blogger that you recommended earlier?
So the one I mentioned was Simo Ava. If you just search for Simo, S-I-M-O, and GTM, he'll come up. I'm not even sure how to spell Ava because I just literally type in Simo and he comes straight up the top normally for me. He's literally the authority on Google Tag Manager. He's also a really nice gentleman. I've heard him trying to speak Swedish poetry before, which wasn't recommended, but generally speaking, everything else that he does say is absolutely on point. There's an event which hopefully will be returning called Measure Camp, and he usually comes along to those. If you get the opportunity to, make sure you listen to one of his sessions. They're usually quite advanced though, and I usually sit there sort of getting a little bit lost, but learning a crazy amount.
Great, thank you. How far can you go with GTM?
And thanks for that, Gerry. And what about you, Gemma? You mentioned someone.
Sorry, Joe, I didn't hear you very well there. Were you asking me?
I just said yes. I think the internet on my end, sorry, is lagging a bit. So apologies for that. We just wanted to know what your blogger was.
It's the same guy. And his surname, you'd spell his surname A-H-A-V-A.
That's right.
Great, thank you. So how far would you go with GTM? Injecting metadata, injecting content on pages, for example, content on e-commerce category pages that you can't do using your CMS. Sounds like you can use GTM as a CMS.
Well, the problem there is the fact that it will slow everything down if you do that. Basically, GTM will load lots of bits in the back end almost, even if you're not using it on that particular page. So whilst I've hacked a lot of things onto websites, for the same reasons Paul done, basically, I wouldn't say it's a CMS at all. And the other minor problem is the fact, and one of the things that I've realized relatively recently is the fact that a lot of people are actually blocking GTM. So a lot of people are now browsing the internet with ghost-free plugins, with ad blockers, and it is quite popular for people to actually be blocking Google Tag Manager, so they won't actually see the kind of content that you've injected. I mean, it was only relatively recently that Google's been able to really process JavaScript from Google Tag Manager at speed and scale. In the past, it would take weeks or even months for it to really kind of reprocess bits. So it's only a relatively recent thing that I've actually been using Google Tag Manager to kind of do as much injection on schema stuff as we do at the moment.
Yeah, and
I would
also,
say it's great for. Sorry, Paul.
No, you're fine.
It's great for things that need to be fast, things that you haven't got time to fight through your backlog prioritization for. But for long-term things, definitely put them in your CMS. It's not a long-term solution for things.
Yeah, and the other one I was going to say is make sure you delete the tags that you're not using, because I've got one GTM account. I literally just tested it this afternoon, and I can't remember how many tags it's got in there. It's got a lot, and they've got expiry dates on them because they're all for different campaign tracking. And if you run the container, the GTM container URL through web page speed test just on its own, it's like 1 second slower than an average sort of like container that I've got. So, you know what I mean? If you have too much stuff building up in there, it does seem like it will slow it down a little bit.
Actually, that's a great thing. Have you seen Simo Ava's GTM tools? So Simo Ava has actually built a set of tools, and one of the things you can do in it is visualize a container. And this visualization of the container is really useful to find what's firing where and what's linked to everything. It's also, it really impresses clients because it looks quite beautiful.
Great, thank you. I think Joe's back. Sorry for all the technical difficulties, guys. I think that's everything we have time for today, though. Thank you all for joining us. Back over to Joe if we're able to. If we can hear you. No? Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And I hope everyone has a lovely weekend. We'll be back on Monday with a
Can you hear me now? Do you want to share the screen? Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Joe. We'll be back on Monday with do link matter, backlink profiling. And we'll see you all then. Have a good weekend.
Cheers.